Hi, I'm Ibby, and you're listening to Kill the Cat. On this episode of Marvel Madness, we're looking at how the Falcon and the Winter Soldier uses banter. While watching Sam and Bucky snipe at each other is fun, this style of dialogue is difficult to get right. So we've compiled some tips and tricks. Spoilers ahead for the Falcon and the Winter Soldier and the MCU in general. But otherwise, enjoy the episode. Welcome to episode number 5, I think, of Marvel Madness. Today, we are talking about Falcon and the Winter Soldier. This is a really fun one. From the get-go, it has its flaws. It feels like there's stuff that's been cut out and there's a few too many things going on in the show overall. Still fairly enjoyable.
And one of the reasons it's so enjoyable is because of its 2 stars.
Yes.
And their characters and their banter.
Yeah. One of the things that stood out to me as I was watching the show was just how funny Falcon and Bucky are. And especially when they're antagonizing each other. And it's banter is what we came to. How do you do banter?
And we've seen them do this long before this series.
Yes.
I think mostly in Civil War. So the story goes, we're saying we don't know how much of this is true and how much of this is a nice story they tell in interviews. But Anthony Mackie and Sebastian Stan had such good chemistry as Sam and Bucky that they went to Kevin Feige and said, can we do a buddy cop kind of thing? I think this was originally meant to be a movie. And then they turned it into a TV show because of COVID. I think you can tell.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the banter's really good. It was good in Civil War. It's good in this series. And so we're going to break down, if you want to have some characters to have a bit of banter.
Yeah, because
how to do that.
Banter is really common in buddy-up action films, but it doesn't always land well. And this show lands especially well. Yeah,
so just to give definition of banter, it's the playful and friendly exchange of teasing remarks, or to use it as a verb, to exchange remarks in a good-humoured teasing way. So it's not Steve Rogers and Tony Stark in Avengers, for example, because what they're saying hurts and is designed to hurt.
Yeah.
This isn't necessarily designed to hurt. It is designed to annoy the other person.
Yeah, it's 2 guys who basically, this is their everyday, and they're just kind of trying to make it a little bit more interesting by giving their coworker some shit.
Yes, there is some underlying tension, which we will get into later. When they meet in the show, it's post-Endgame. Steve has gone back in time, presumably dead, although that has not been confirmed anywhere.
At the very least, fully retired.
Definitely retired. He turned into Joe Biden and he retired. Now you will never unsee it.
God.
Anyway, gave the shield to Sam. At the beginning of the show, Sam has given the shield back and said, I'm not going to be Captain America because of reasons we'll get into later. Bucky doesn't agree with that decision and has been ignoring Sam's calls. But Sam is still checking in on him, which is a bit cute. And then they team up to fight the Flag Smashers.
So in terms of the banter, there's a few things that make this really work. And so that's what we want to try and break down. Banter is a hard concept to break down because so much of it is based on characters and the chemistry that your actors have and partly the way the script is written and how much of it is improvised. So this is not a exact science as to how you do banter, but hopefully we've got some helpful stuff. The very first thing we've got is that we've actually got 2 really strong characters with very different personalities. So we've known them for a while, which really helps, and I think that's helped all of Phase 4 of Marvel, is that we've got a lot of characters we really know already and we know very well. And so we can see shows like WandaVision or Hawkeye where they are breaking off and doing something different and we don't need a lot of setup. We don't need origin stories. But yeah, so we know that Bucky is very serious and brooding, and partly that's due to him having been the Winter Soldier and
just an odd 70 years or so of trauma. Yeah, as you do.
Significantly traumatized, and really he's only ever opened up to Steve, but now Steve's not there anymore. Sam, we see, has always been charismatic and very funny, and he's the kind of guy who will make jokes. Our first interaction with Sam is the wonderful scene in Winter Soldier.
Well, we talked about this, I think, in our Captain America episode, but Sam's introduction is just phenomenal.
It's perfect.
He just gets negged by Steve over and over again. Doesn't get mad about it,
No.
but also doesn't fangirl either. And it's just a very nice blend of gets Steve's humor, meets him at his level, but then also within like 5 minutes manages to find a way to empathize with him. Your bed's too soft. Come down to the VA.
Yeah.
And that's just such a lovely introduction of who Sam Wilson is.
Even with his sarcasm and like banter, he's very optimistic and he's very hopeful. You see that in how he goes back home. He's like, no, we're going to get the boat back up and running. I'll get us the loan that we need. Like, he eventually brings the whole community together, calling in favors they owed his parents. Like, he's very approachable and he's friendly with everyone. I love the scene where there's a kid and he's like, hey, it's Black Falcon. He's like, Black Falcon? He's like, what, you're black and you're a kid? Are you black kid?
Very willing to dish it out.
Yeah.
And that, okay, so I would say step one of banter, get two people who are opposites. So we talked about traumatized Bucky, brooding. Bucky is also funny, by the way.
Yeah.
He's not Batman.
No, yeah, and you see, like, when you watch the first Avenger, he's very funny, he's very charismatic, he's very witty.
So I'm going to say something a little sad here, but sad but heartwarming. So when Sam meets Bucky, that's like post-Winter Soldier Bucky. And someone pointed out that last scene with the cookout and then Bucky's got the kids dangling off his arm and stuff, that's Sam finally getting to meet Steve's Bucky.
Yeah.
Like the guy that Steve was best friends with and was a ladies' man and like always looked after Steve. Like getting to know that Bucky.
Yeah.
Anyway, but in the beginning, yes, Bucky is brooding. He's very lost. He's seeing a therapist who I can't tell in text is meant to be awful, or I just find her awful. Well, she's not awful, but
she's taking a very blunt approach with him. I feel like I'm like, this is terrible practice, but also kind of maybe what Bucky needs
That's
in a
fair.
therapist.
Yeah, but he doesn't open up to her. He lies about having nightmares. Who do you pair that person with? You pair him with outgoing, charismatic people person, Sam Wilson. And that is the premise for a lot of comedy. They're two guys with a mutual friend, and the mutual friend's not there anymore.
So they're just two guys.
They're just two guys. And actually they had this all the way back in Civil War. So the difference between like teasing and banter versus insults. One of my favorite things from Civil War, you know that scene they're lying on the ground and they've been webbed down and Bucky's like, you couldn't have done that earlier, and Sam's like, I hate you. Just before that, Spider-Man was coming for Sam and Bucky leapt in front of him and like shielded him with his body. Like, don't you dare touch him. So that's their dynamic.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's a very real thing of like, they are looking for ways to annoy each other throughout. Like, what I love about this is it is two guys who happen to have to work together fairly frequently, and both of them in the work are just kind of trying to make it a bit more interesting, and so they just give each other shit.
Like that scene where Sam pretends he's about to stand up in the plane, so Bucky moves forward and then Sam moves back like they're five.
They also often look for, like, they always have to have someone to antagonize. So they'll often team up when like John Walker is there, and they'll both be antagonizing John Walker. Like that's when they're fighting the Dora Milaje, and Sam's like, we should really help. And Bucky's like,
Looking strong, John.
Looking strong, John.
Or there's that scene where they're walking along the road.
Yeah.
And they're bickering, like Sam's winding him up.
Yeah.
That's what they do. Like they're winding
wind
each other up. And calling him Cyborg Brain, and I can see the cogs moving. And then Walker and Lamar drive by and give them a ride, and immediately all that antagonism is forced on John and Lamar and not at each other.
I love when Lamar reveals his name. He's like, I'm Battlestar. And Bucky's just like, stop the car. Just gets out.
Yeah, so they're never each other's enemy.
No.
They clash, but there's always someone to fight, whether that's Walker or Carly or even like Zemo. They have the same goal. They have different ways they want to have that goal achieved, but ultimately they want to stop the Flag Smashers.
Yeah, they're opposed in methodology, but united in mission.
Yeah, which leads to some fun things of like, so you have that opening scene where Bucky's like just wants to run in and Sam's like, wait, and then teases him because he's like, oh, is there more than two? I'm sorry. Bucky throws himself in. I actually had in my notes, I wish there was a little bit more in Madripoor instead of letting Zemo call all the shots. I wish there was more of Bucky being like, this is my world now. Sam, you're empathizing and like how you work with people isn't going to work here.
Yeah.
This is really brutal. I think a really good example of that is that scene where Sam gets the phone call from Sarah, which I hate. It feels so plot convenient and it drives him up the wall.
Yeah.
I wish instead of doing that, the tension that blows their cover is Bucky's forced to stay in the Winter Soldier character. And whatever, however you want to interpret that, starts getting hurt, or it starts getting very morally complex. And then you could focus on Sam being caught of like, do I blow my cover and save my friend? Or do I keep my cover?
Yeah.
And I think either of those choices would work. Anyway, I had some script
And also,
notes for this,
like,
but
if you go down that path, right, like, and Sam does blow the cover, that's a reason for Bucky to be like, you fucked it up.
yes.
Like, and that can create the conflict that then separates them for a little bit because they then have to come back together for the last.
And if Sam doesn't blow his cover and Bucky gets hurt, he can then go away and sit with that and be like, is that what it means to be Captain America? I don't think so. Yeah, so I had this as just exterior enemies. So essentially people to banter with that aren't each other. Same quest doesn't always have to be terrorists want to blow up people. In episode 5, they fix a boat.
Yep.
It's the best episode.
It's a great episode. I loved your little headcanon that Sarah and Bucky are not interested in each other at all, but both want to antagonize Sam.
So they only flirt with each other to annoy Sam. So that's my Bucky and Sarah headcanon.
I think that should just be canon.
Yes.
So, like, we've got characters who will banter well naturally, and I do love seeing when they banter with the other characters, when they're giving Zemo shit, when they're giving John Walker
He's
shit.
out of line, but he's right.
But one of the things that makes this so successful is also that the actors, they have incredible chemistry, and they're also both very funny. Both have done comedy before, and they work well together. I sang before we started, like, I think if you'd have had other people cast in either of the roles, there's a strong chance this show may never have happened.
And they tested them out in Civil War, and we've seen that dynamic already works.
Yeah.
And, like, there's not a ton of them in Civil War.
No. It's this, like, when they're...
The fight scene, and there's the car scene, which is, can you move your seat up? But also that really adorable thing of, like, Steve kisses Sharon, and the camera cuts back, and they're like, yeah, go Steve. They're both just, like, being proud friends.
Yeah. And in this show, the banter isn't about either character being better than the other character or even either actor being better than the other actor. So when I think about like banter in buddy comedies, my mind goes to a lot of so there's like Hobbs and Shaw is probably a recent example, and The Hitman's Bodyguard. And these are shows, or movies rather, where it's like there's two really big name actors who are just kind of trying to one-up each other the whole time. And then their characters are also written as two big personalities who are trying to one-up each other the whole time. And that just feels performative. Every line feels like it's a little bit forced in a way. Whereas in this, the actors are supporting each other to make a funnier outcome. Like, each of them can dish it out and each of them can take it as well.
Yeah, like think of them a little bit like siblings. I know people ship them. Okay, so sorry about that. But like just taking that off the table and I see why people do. But it's that sibling thing of like you generally have to spend time with your siblings and sometimes it's really good and sometimes you bicker.
Yeah.
However, poking through that, there are some underlying resentments that is driving this banter. So first thing we talked about was that kind of strong characters and having opposite personalities. So Sam is non-violent, while like, I say Sam is non-violent, Sam is definitely will fight and do violence. He's not a pacifist.
He's a soldier.
We see that from that amazing first action scene.
The action in this show as well.
That first hostage rescue is great with
So
Sam's
good.
wings.
Yeah. But yeah, no, it's like Sam will always go for the let's talk it out kind of route.
Yeah.
He does that with Carly. Like, he's like, I get what she's saying. I understand her side. I don't agree with how she's doing it, but let me go talk to her. And he's almost successful. There's a real moment of connection until John Walker comes in and fucks it up.
Yes. And I don't want to say tricks Bucky, but like pushes Bucky to interrupt because his partner's alone with Carly. Oh no. Bucky cares about Sam.
Yeah.
But they also have a couple of very deep opposite ideologies, which makes them resentful of the other. So Sam believes the best way to honor Steve Rogers is to retire the shield. and put it down. Bucky is mad because Sam did that, which goes against Steve's last wishes. So it's a very like deeply personal conflict to have, because they say they're two guys with a mutual friend. That friend was like meant a lot to them.
Yeah.
And they both think that the other is not really honoring his memory.
And there's also the issue of like race, in that like having a black Captain America is something a lot of people are going to hate. And Sam has to, if he takes up the shield, he's going to have to deal with that. And is the world ready for that?
Because he even has Isaiah Bradley saying no self-respecting black man would want to hold that shield. And of course, Bucky and Steve, neither of them have thought about that.
Yeah.
They just saw Sam as the best choice. Yes, we will give them the shield, and didn't. And obviously this show, like race is like a massive theme in the show. They didn't consider that, so Bucky doesn't understand why Sam gave up the shield and why Sam is a little resentful of Bucky really coming at him. I feel like Bucky's struggles are a little more personal, which is, he says, basically, if Steve was wrong about picking Sam, maybe Steve was wrong about putting all that time saving Bucky from Hydra and the Accords and even Tony. Was he worth all that? So that kind of culminates at the end after the battle with John Walker, and Bucky throws the shield at the ground at Sam's feet, covered in blood, and Sam's tearfully wiping off the blood.
Yeah.
And then they talk about it.
Yeah. There's the great scene where they're basically playing catch with the shield, because that's how two guys would talk about anything. They have to be doing some activity. They can't just have a conversation. I think the fact that there is so much time given, this is a note I had, is that the show gives time for the quipping back and forth and for them to just play off each other, like the scene in the psychologist's office and the scene like when they're just in the car with John Walker. There's a bunch of small scenes where it's just like it is time for the two of them to banter a bit and bicker a bit. The scene in the airplane, like yeah. But because they do all that time, when we get to this serious issue of like they need to talk about where they're at and what, like the resentment and the issues they're holding, they can actually do that because they've earned that time to do that, rather than I think we've all seen movies where suddenly people just have a conversation at the end and everything's fine and they're happy again, and it's like you didn't really get yourselves there in a natural way.
Stay tuned for our Hawkeye episode where we will talk all about that.
Yeah, but this is like when they finally get to that point, it's like Bucky admits to having nightmares, and the fact that he doesn't feel like he's getting anywhere with like trying to make amends. And Sam can call him honestly on like, you're not making amends, you're avenging. You need to go and actually do the work and not just take the people who you put in power out of power, but actually go to the people who you've wronged and you've hurt and apologize and find a way to help.
Yeah, and give them some closure.
Be of service, I think is...
Yeah. And Bucky straight up apologizes to Sam for not understanding what it would mean for a black man to take the shield. And not seeing it, that is a really, really complicated decision for Sam.
Yeah.
So I wish there was a little bit more of this in here. I don't think it was quite done as well as it could have been, but it's there. Another great thing about that opposites attract thing is they're also holding the key to solving each other's problem. They need to get there. They need to earn that. Yeah. So you just said Sam helps Bucky go from avenging to amending. Bucky finally gets to sleep on Sam's couch. And Sam is struggling a little bit, I would say, with imposter syndrome at the beginning. Doesn't believe he's quite worthy of being Captain America, doesn't think that's the right thing to do. Bucky gets his suit made, and I think it's really significant that the first person to call Sam Cap is Bucky.
Yeah.
And that whole thing of like, it doesn't matter what Steve thought.
Yeah.
Matters what Bucky thinks, because Bucky thinks Sam can be the next Captain America.
I agree it doesn't carry it perfectly to the end. Like,
and
it
I wish, the last episode of the show, there's too much going on. I'm really annoyed that John Walker got a redemption. Because he shows up and he's fighting with them, that takes away time that should be Sam and Bucky fighting together. For comparison, think about one of the last scenes in Hawkeye where Kate and Clint team up with the bow and arrow against the tracksuit mafia and they're shooting all the trick arrows. Yeah. And then they go off and conclude their separate character arcs. And that just isn't here. Because you've got to do the Flag Smashers and Zemo and Sharon Carter and John Walker. And I just wish it was more Bucky and Sam focused.
There's a few too many people going on. And Like Zemo really needed to be out the second last episode with Dora Milaje taking him away.
Yeah, I wish John Walker just wasn't there. I just wish they set up, I think his new name is US Agent. I wish that was just a post-credit scene that they set up.
Yeah.
I found the whole power broker thing very clunky, which I think a lot of people did.
Yeah.
Most people figured that out in like episode 3, and then doing the reveal here didn't fit.
Yeah.
The pieces are there.
Just not quite arranged how you need them for a finale. And so in terms of our takeaways, I think for me, like just remembering to write opposed characters who need to be on the same mission, but who aren't trying to one-up each other. Like banter can just be there for fun. It can just be there for entertainment value, and the characters can be doing it just to keep themselves entertained while they're doing, well, it's a couple of guys just doing their job.
Yeah, and think about if you're spending really long hours doing hard work with someone, you're going to get really annoyed with that person. You still care about them. You would still rush in to save them, and you want to be there for them. But annoyed. They're annoyed at each other just all the time. So yeah, I guess my takeaway was like banter isn't about the dialogue itself, really. I feel like a lot of new writers would start trying to think of like witty lines or things they can say, and that's fine. But before you actually get to the dialogue, think about the characters, think about how they oppose each other. Think about how they might have different values that are going to rub up against one another. Then I would add a deeper reason for each to dislike the other that should be a secret from the other person. So, for example, for Sam, it's not really a secret, but he hasn't brought up the fact that race is a big part of this for him, and Bucky's not seeing that. Bucky hasn't brought up that Sam giving up the shield made him doubt himself. Common enemy, bigger people to fight, and then they each have a problem or a character flaw that the other solves by the end.
I did like, because Bucky does bring it up in the psych session, which is I think episode 3 of like, if he's wrong about you, maybe he's wrong about me.
Episode 2. Like
is
it's
that
super
episode
early.
2?
Yeah.
But Sam just walks out.
Yes, Sam does not explain at that point.
And it's like I rewatched it and I was like, oh, that's so sad for Bucky because he's actually just opened up, which he has not done before, and Sam has shut him down.
Sam is not perfect, okay? He's not Ted Lasso, and I like that about him. Yeah.
Know who your characters are. I feel like we say that a lot. Know
Yes.
your characters, know your themes, know what you're trying to do. Once you've got that, that's when you bring in the fun dialogue, and that's when you work with actors to do improvisation. Make sure your actors have good chemistry if you want to pull off really good banter.
Ideally, have a 10-year franchise where you can throw different combinations of characters together and see if they work.
Yeah, and then take those ones that do work and give them a show of their own.
Yes, that airs in Disney Plus, and there's like 5 in 1 year, so if one isn't very good, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. We've all got the means and resources to do that.
Yes, that's how you do this.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Kill the Cat. If you'd like to keep up to date with the show, you can subscribe on your platform of choice. We've got one more episode left in our Marvel Madness series, and of course, we're covering Hawkeye just in time for the holiday season. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram, so feel free to drop us a line and let us know your favourite bantering buddy duo. Until next time, this has been Kill the Cat. Dun 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 dun.
Mum will sue us if we use that as our intro music.